Good day. My name is Mark Lucchetti, Associate Field Marketing Manager with Wiley Science Solutions. Welcome to today's webinar entitled Introducing KnowItAll Quantitation, Complete and Simplify Your Analytical Workflow. It is my pleasure today to introduce you to our speaker for this informative session, Assistant Editor, Dr. Leanna Ergen of Wiley Science Solutions. Dr. Ergen helps create tools for spectroscopy, structural, and scientific standard reference data, and helps create innovative software applications. She completed her PhD in clinical bioanalytical chemistry from Cleveland State University, where she developed a protocol for processing hyperspectral image data that distinguishes the spectra, removes degeneracies caused by symmetry, and is generalized to work with any number of wavelength dimensions and spectra. We are excited to have Dr. Ergen present us today her webinar entitled Introducing KnowItAll Quantitation, Complete and Simplify Your Analytical Workflow. We encourage the audience to submit questions, which will be addressed at the end of this session. With that, I'll turn the stage over to Dr. Ergen for her presentation. Take it away, Leanna.
Thank you, Mark. So the agenda for today is first I'll be introducing our new quantitation tool. It's useful for GCMS, IR, Raman, UV-Vis, and GC. After that, I'll be discussing the pain points that a lot of different laboratories experience, and then the value of this software and how it can help overcome a lot of those pain points. Then I'll be talking about who would want to use this software, the workflow that the user would use to accomplish quantitation. Then I'll be giving a demonstration of the software, and at the end we should have time for a question and answer session. So Wiley's KnowItAll has always helped to answer the question of what the identity of a substance is. In other words, qualitative analysis. But with KnowItAll 2024, you will now be able to answer the question of how much of a substance there is. In other words, quantitative analysis. So this is consolidated laboratory software. That means that you don't have to deal with fractured software and processes within your lab. It's intuitively designed with a simple step-by-step process in a single interface. So quantitation is optional in KnowItAll Analytical Edition and JESCO Edition, and it's included in KnowItAll Campus-Wide Solution. So laboratory pain points. A lot of labs have fractured and often out-of-date manufacturer software on their instruments. If that's the case, maybe each instrument has a different software package with a different way of processing and quantifying data, if it has it at all. And it creates this situation where people need to be trained on a smorgasbord of different softwares. It's a huge time commitment to get trained and become proficient in all of the software that the lab uses. So a lot of times people just default to Microsoft Excel for quantitation, and that works fine if everything is done correctly, but that's a big if. So what happens if someone makes an error? What if you need to keep track of who performed what calculation or what changes were made? It starts to fall short. And that makes it very difficult to standardize procedures. So for years, KnowItAll has streamlined qualitative analysis. Now we're streamlining quantitative analysis into the same familiar application. So because all the tools and techniques are integrated into a single environment, KnowItAll makes the analytical laboratory workflow seamless. So KnowItAll for quantitation is currently suitable for GCMS, IR, Raman, UV-Vis, and GC. And we do plan to add more techniques into the future. So quantitative methods include external calibration, internal calibration, and standard addition analysis. So the value of KnowItAll quantitation tool, a single application across multiple techniques ensures that lab staff can perform quantitation across the lab consistently in one package. So researchers often find themselves navigating multiple software packages. KnowItAll's quantitation tool eliminates that need. With quantitation, there is no need to switch to tools outside of your analytical workflow. There's no need to navigate multiple software packages. If you're performing quantitation in Microsoft Excel, it's a manual process that's prone to error. It's prone to not being able to identify who was doing what and what was done to the files. But with our new quantitation tool, there is no need to navigate multiple software packages because the entire workflow can be done in KnowItAll. So because it's integrated with the familiar KnowItAll interface, it shortens the learning curve and reduces the amount of training that lab personnel need. It is also VPAT 508 accessible, and we are continuously working to improve accessibility. So our quantitation tool offers consistency, time savings, streamlined workflow, reproducibility, reduced training time due to a single software package. This is quantitation done properly and consistently. So who uses quantitation? A lot of people. I'm not going to read through the whole list, but you can. This list is not inclusive, but people who use quantitation would be anyone who wants to determine the amount of a substance. And considering that quantitation is taught in every undergraduate chemistry curriculum, it's worth noting that Wiley offers quantitation at a highly discounted academic rate for campus-wide solutions. So this is the workflow that a user in the software would use, going from left to right. On the left, you see the type of data that needs to be input for external calibration, internal calibration, and standard addition analysis. The blue in the middle is what's done in the software. So KnowItAll quantitation, step by step, is step 1. It plots the signal versus the concentration. In step 2, it derives a calibration equation. You can save that calibration, but at the end, you are given an output. So if your input is external calibration, samples, and known quantity of calibrant, the output of the software is going to be analyte concentrations. If you're performing internal calibration, the data that you input is samples and a known ratio of analyte. The software will output ratios of analyte versus internal standard. And finally, if you're doing standard addition analysis, the data that you input would be samples and a known quantity of analyte. The data that's output is analyte concentration. And now I'm going to be switching over to KnowItAll to give a demonstration of the software. So when KnowItAll first opens, this is what you see. Very first thing we need to do is navigate to quantitation. So I am down here in the bottom left, clicking quantitation, then I'm clicking quantitation again, so I'm now in the app. So my second example is going to be an internal calibration using GCMS. So I'm clicking New Internal Calibration, and it's prompting me to find data. So I need to go to my GCMS data folder, and the samples that I want in my calibration curve are these 4 at the bottom. And I am opening this. Once again, it's step-by-step procedure. It is prompting me with entering data when it wants me to do something. So I need to know a lot of information about my standard and samples when I'm using GCMS. So I happen to know that my internal standard has a retention time of 11.5 minutes. I know its concentration. I know the mass to charge ratio of the ion that I'm interested in. And I also have that same information about the analyte. And I am going to need to enter that information. So this drop-down list that showed up, I actually want to select my highest concentration sample. The 200 at the end, that's indicative of my concentration. So I'm selecting that. And I also want to choose the mass to charge ratio of the ion that I'm interested in, and that is over here in the top right. I'm interested in a mass to charge ratio of 124. Clicking next in the bottom left. And you might recognize this green bar at the bottom. It says calibration bar. Whenever you see a bar at the bottom with a name, it's basically asking you to select a peak. So yes, I can type the numbers in, but I think it's easier to click down on the bar, drag to the other side of the peak, click up. Those numbers are entered automatically. So now I'm clicking next. So I am interested in the peak with a retention time of 11.5 minutes. In other words, this peak. So I'm clicking this little box at the top of it. And I am interested in an ion with a mass to charge ratio, clicking next at the bottom left. And here, notice that I now have this bar at the bottom says internal standard bar. This wants me to select the peak that's associated with my internal standard. And as I said at the beginning, I already have information on hand about my internal standard and my analyte. I know it says peak at 11 minutes. So click down on one side of the peak, drag to the other side, click up or unclick. I'm clicking next. Once again, I have to enter some more information. So units that my data was collected in is micrograms per milliliter. Actually, micrograms per liter. Sorry about that. Peak area, linear regression is my algorithm, and tangential skim. Clicking next. And here I once again need to type in the concentrations of my different standards. So I have them on hand, 1.60 for the first one, 7.99, enter for the second one, 40.0, enter for the third one, and 200, enter for the fourth one. Double check them and click finish. So once again, this should look familiar for the calibration curve layout at my last example. Here I have R² value, root mean squared error, and equation of the line. Over here I have the data that makes up my calibration curve. Notice this row, I have some X's that would enable me to remove one of these if I wanted to. But import analyte file, now is my chance to import an unknown. So I'm using one of my unknowns and opening it. And this shows up down here, my concentration, 35.157 micrograms per liter. And if you want to create a report, you can create a report. If you want to save the calibration, you can. That's all over at the bottom right. So that's it for my demonstration. Are there any questions?